Hi, welcome to this video tutorial about After Effects, and in particular we're going to talk about sliders. Now, sliders are a really helpful tool in After Effects when you wrap your head around what sliders are and how you can use them easily. Now, I like to picture a slider as nothing more than a value. A slider is just a 0 or 100 or 30. But the added benefit about a slider is that you can animate it and you can apply easing keyframes to it. So how you can add sliders. I have a composition here with a black solid, and when I go to the effects controls, I go to my effects preset and I type in slider. There's a slider control added to the black solid, and now there's a slider on my black solid. And the easiest way to add this slider to the opacity is I alt click on the stopwatch and I pick whip the slider to the opacity. And what happens is this code appears, effect slider control slider, and this is actually just the code for I'm adding 0 instead of the value that was here first. So when I press enter now, or when I click back, the opacity goes to 0 because the slider is set to 0. And when I do the slider to 100, the opacity turns to 100. This slider control name you can actually edit. So you could say, when I press enter, I can edit the name. I can say opacity. And when I press enter, you can see here in effects, it says opacity slider. So this little code just tells the opacity to look at the slider property and see what the value is. And if I just click on this value and drag it to the left and let it go, you can see the value is updated. Now, for one value, that's not really efficient, but let's say you have a bunch of comps and you want to change the opacity of like 10 text fields. Then you can add one slider property for that opacity. I'll add them to all the text opacities and just turn the opacity down with one slider. Well, like as you can imagine, the slider you can animate by clicking the stopwatch, press U on the keyboard. You can see that I added a keyframe here, and I can turn this to 0. Well, and I can animate this. Okay, so far so good. In the next example, I have a blue box, and I wanted to add a padding to it. So let's say I wanted to add a border of 20 pixels or something like that. So one way to do it is I can copy the blue box and open it up. And for example's sake, and when I scale this, sorry, I'll first make it white. Fill to give you, or let's make it black. It's easier to see. When I scale this box, you can see that's not, it is evenly scaled, but the box is not square. So I want it to have 10 pixels here and 10 pixels here. So I can't use scale. So what I can do is actually change the size. But I have two values here, and I don't really want to like add 20 here and add 20 here. And maybe I want to change this later, and then I have to change these two values. Maybe I want to animate the padding or something like that. So we could use a slider for this as well. So we have blue box 2, and we add a slider to it. Let's set this one to 20. And where's my mouse? Let's alt click on the size. Now, something interesting is going on right here, because we have two values and there's actually one expression for the size. And the way After Effects is typing is actually between brackets. You have two values, so let's say X and Y. And so I want to define X first. So that's the first property, and I'm just going to pick whip them to make it easier. So X, so the first value, pick whip, first value, content, rectangle 1, content, path, size, and then the first value. And I wanted to add, so plus, the slider. So I'm going to pick whip the slider. And semicolon to stop this variable. And enter. Y, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to pick whip the second value. And I'm going to do plus the slider, semicolon. And then, so I said X is the size of the rectangle, the first size, plus the slider, second value of the size, plus the slider. And this is the way I'm going to tell After Effects. So X and Y, first and second value. And when I click away, here you go. We got a padding around the box. And when we increase the value of the slider, it actually increases the padding around the box. So that's two ways to use sliders. Of course, there's a bunch of other ways, but I think so. This could be padding, and now you can see here effect padding slider is updated. Just wrap your head around it. A slider is nothing more than a value. I think that's really key here. Have fun in After Effects, and I'll see you in a next tutorial.